The twin moons of Azura cast their pale light across the stone altar where Kira knelt, her bioluminescent skin dimming with fear. As High Priestess of the Luminari, she had dedicated her life to interpreting the ancient scrolls, but never had she imagined becoming a sacrifice herself. "Heretic," hissed Elder Vorex, his ceremonial mask hiding the face Kira had once trusted. "You dare question the will of the sky gods? Your progressive interpretations poison the minds of our youth." Kira raised her chin defiantly, the patterns of light beneath her translucent skin pulsing with determination. "The scrolls speak of communion, not sacrifice. Our ancestors never demanded blood." The gathered crowd murmured uneasily. Since the meteor shower 3 cycles ago, Vorex's faction had seized control, claiming the celestial event was a sign of the gods' displeasure. Old rituals, long abandoned, were resurrected with frightening zeal. "The signs cannot be ignored," Vorex proclaimed, raising his staff. "The earth trembles. Crops wither. The gods demand atonement from the one who twisted their words." 2 guards seized Kira's arms, their grip bruising her delicate skin. She didn't struggle. It would only confirm their accusations of her unworthiness. Instead, she looked to the stars, drawing strength from their distant light. "You will return to the sacred soil," Vorex intoned, "and if the gods find you worthy, they may restore your spirit." The procession moved silently through the bioluminescent forest, a macabre parade illuminated by the natural glow of flora and fauna. Kira memorized every step of the journey, though she held little hope of escape. The ceremonial burial ground came into view, a clearing where the soil was soft and dark. The pit awaited, freshly dug and lined with ritual stones. Someone placed a breathing reed in her mouth, a formality. If the gods favored her, they would sustain her breath. If not, the reed would do little to prolong her suffering. As they lowered her into the earth, Kira's luminescence flared in one final, desperate display. Then the dirt began to fall, covering her limbs, her torso, her face. The weight pressed down, and darkness enveloped her completely. Through the reed, she took shallow breaths, conserving oxygen. Hours passed. The ceremonial guards would be gone by now, leaving her fate to divine intervention. The reed provided minimal air, but eventually, it would not be enough. Already lightheaded, Kira felt her consciousness wavering. Marcus Valenti adjusted the settings on his geological scanner, frowning at the anomalous readings. 3 weeks on this unexplored region of Azura, and the planet still managed to surprise him daily. "Base, this is Valenti. I'm picking up unusual energy fluctuations in Sector 7. Permission to investigate?" The response crackled through his comm unit. "Proceed with caution, Valenti. Remember protocol, observe only." Marcus nodded, though no one could see him. At 35, he'd spent more than a decade exploring frontier worlds for the Terran Science Division. Azura was particularly fascinating, a world with remarkably Earth-like conditions but evolved along an entirely different path. The scanner led him to a clearing that showed signs of recent activity. Footprints, disturbed soil, arranged stones in a circular pattern. Anthropological significance, certainly, but nothing that explained the energy readings. Then his scanner pinged again, stronger now. The source was beneath his feet. Marcus knelt, running his hand over the freshly turned earth. The soil was loose, recently disturbed. His instincts, honed by years in the field, screamed that something was wrong. Protocol dictated non-interference with indigenous practices, but when his scanner detected a faint biological signature below ground, Marcus didn't hesitate. He began to dig, first with a small field shovel, then with his bare hands as urgency overtook caution. 3 feet down, his fingers brushed against something smooth and faintly luminous. He cleared more dirt away, revealing what appeared to be a hand, not human, but undeniably alive. It twitched at his touch. "Hold on," he muttered, digging faster. When he finally uncovered a face, Marcus gasped. Delicate features framed by what resembled hair but glowed with internal light. The being's eyes fluttered open, iridescent and filled with terror. In that moment, all thoughts of protocol vanished. This was no longer about science or exploration. A sentient being had been buried alive, and Marcus would not, look away. "You're safe now," he said softly, knowing she couldn't understand his words but hoping his tone might convey his intentions. "I'm getting you out of here." Marcus worked methodically, clearing away the remaining soil that imprisoned Kira's slender form. Her luminescence flickered weakly, like a dying star struggling to maintain its light. As the last of the earth fell away, she gasped for air, her chest heaving with desperate breaths that replaced the meager supply from the now clogged reed. "Easy now," Marcus said, supporting her as she attempted to sit up. Her skin felt cool beneath his touch, with a subtle texture like velvet over glass. The luminous patterns beneath pulsed erratically, whether from fear or physical distress, he couldn't tell. Kira's mind raced through a fog of confusion. The being before her matched no description in luminary texts. Bipedal and solid, lacking the translucence of her people, with strange coverings over most of its body. Its face bore no ceremonial markings, and its skin absorbed light rather than emanating it. Most disturbing of all, it had found her. Which meant it had defiled sacred ground. When the creature reached toward her again, Kira recoiled, her light patterns flashing in warning colors. The universal sign among her people for danger and distrust. Marcus recognized her fear and withdrew his hand, sitting back on his heels. "I won't hurt you," he said, then realized the futility of words. Instead, he slowly reached for his canteen, unscrewed the cap, and offered it to her with deliberate movements. Kira stared at the strange container, then at him. Tentatively, she accepted it, sniffing the opening before taking a cautious sip. The cool water revived her parched tissues, and she drank deeply. "That's it," Marcus encouraged, relieved to see color returning to her luminous features. His scanner beeped again, and he glanced at the readings. Multiple biological signatures approaching from the north, presumably members of her species, though whether friend or foe he couldn't determine. Kira sensed it too. Her head snapped up, eyes wide with renewed terror as she looked in the direction of her village. She grabbed Marcus's arm, her fingers digging into his sleeve as she made urgent gestures toward the forest. "They're coming back," he guessed, reading her panic. When she tugged him again, more insistently, he nodded. "Right. Time to go." The decision violated every protocol in his handbook, but Marcus couldn't leave her to face whoever had buried her alive. He helped her to her feet, steadying her as she swayed unsteadily. Kira's legs threatened to buckle beneath her. Hours in the burial pit had weakened her, but fear proved a powerful stimulant. She pointed toward the densest part of the forest, away from both the village and the burial ground. They moved as quickly as her condition allowed, ducking beneath the glowing fronds of Azura's native vegetation. The bioluminescent flora provided enough light to navigate by, which Marcus found both beautiful and unnerving. Every plant, every insect-like creature seemed to pulse with the same internal light as the woman he'd rescued. After an hour of difficult travel, they reached a small ridge overlooking a valley. In the distance, Marcus could see the lights of his research outpost, a collection of prefabricated modules established 3 months earlier by the advance team. "My base," he said, pointing. "We'll be safe there." Kira followed his gesture, her expression unreadable as she contemplated the angular structures so unlike the organic architecture of her people. She had heard whispers of sky visitors establishing a presence beyond the western mountains, but Elder Vorex had forbidden any contact, declaring them harbingers of destruction sent by angry gods. Now, she was about to enter their domain. The irony wasn't lost on her, seeking sanctuary with the very beings Vorex feared most. When they finally reached the perimeter of the outpost, Marcus's comm unit crackled to life. "Valenti. Where the hell have you been? You missed 2 check-ins. Dr. Elena Novak's voice carried equal parts relief and irritation. Got a bit sidetracked, Marcus replied, glancing at Kira. And I'm bringing a guest. Meet us at the medical bay, and... Elena? Keep this quiet for now. The airlock doors slid open, bathing them in harsh artificial light. Kira flinched, raising a hand to shield her sensitive eyes. Everything about this place assaulted her senses, the sterile smell, the humming machinery, the rigid lines of the structures. Elena was waiting for them, her expression shifting from annoyance to astonishment as she took in the luminous visitor. Marcus, what have you done? What I had to, he replied simply. She was buried alive. Some kind of ritual sacrifice, I think. Kira watched their exchange, focusing intently on their mouth movements and vocal patterns. Her people possessed a natural aptitude for languages, necessary for a species whose communication combined verbal and light-based elements. Elena approached cautiously, her scientific curiosity overwhelming initial shock. Remarkable. Her biological structure appears semi-translucent, with some kind of bioluminescent system beneath the epidermis. She's not a specimen, Marcus said sharply. She's a person who needs our help. Elena nodded, chastened. Of course. Let's get her to medical. The examination room contained equipment Kira couldn't begin to comprehend. When Elena attempted to take a blood sample, Kira's luminescence flared defensively, and she backed away. It's okay, Marcus said, demonstrating on himself first. He pressed a small device against his arm, wincing slightly as it extracted a tiny blood sample. See? It doesn't hurt much. After watching carefully, Kira hesitantly extended her arm. The momentary discomfort was worth establishing trust with these beings who had saved her from certain death. As Elena analyzed the samples, Marcus offered Kira nutrient-rich foods from their supplies, carefully noting which she accepted and which she refused. Communication remained limited to gestures and expressions, but already a tentative understanding was forming between them. That night, as Kira rested in a room allocated to her, Marcus reviewed the scanner data from the burial site. The energy readings hadn't been geological at all, they had been emanating from Kira herself. Her bioelectrical field was unlike anything in their database. You've started something that can't be undone, Elena said quietly, joining him at the console. First contact should have been carefully planned, not this. Marcus looked up at her, his expression resolute. Sometimes plans find us, not the other way around. Besides, I think they've already had their first contact. And from what I've seen, it didn't go well. Outside the window, Azura's twin moons illuminated the alien landscape, while inside, an unexpected visitor from that world dreamed of stars and salvation. The morning cycle began with alarms blaring throughout the research outpost. Marcus bolted upright in his chair, he'd fallen asleep reviewing data on luminary physiology. The security screens showed motion at the perimeter fence, 6 figures moving with purpose toward the main entrance. Proximity alert, the AI announced unnecessarily. Unknown entities approaching eastern perimeter. Marcus hurried to Kira's quarters, finding her already awake and pressed against the window. Her luminescence had shifted to a deep crimson pattern, a color he hadn't seen her display before. When she turned to him, her eyes held unmistakable dread. Vorex, she said, pointing to the approaching group. It was the first word she'd spoken aloud since her rescue, and the sound was melodic despite her obvious fear. In just 2 days, Kira had proven herself an extraordinarily quick study. Through a combination of visual learning programs and direct interaction with the research team, she'd begun grasping basic Terran speech patterns. Her progress suggested either remarkable cognitive abilities or prior linguistic knowledge of human communication, perhaps both. Elena rushed in, her expression grim. Marcus, the biologics on those visitors match her species, but they're armed with some kind of energy weapons. Not advanced technology, but definitely dangerous. The security feed showed the leader, presumably this Vorex, brandishing an ornate staff that pulsed with the same bioluminescent energy that flowed beneath Kira's skin. He wore an elaborate headdress that obscured most of his features, but his stance radiated authority and menace. "God's angry," Kira managed, her limited vocabulary straining to convey her meaning. She made a digging motion, then pointed to herself. "Me, unfinished sacrifice. Them, finish." "Not happening," Marcus said firmly, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Her skin temperature had dropped several degrees, a stress response, he'd learned. "Elena, initiate diplomatic protocols, but keep the shields up. I want to know what they want without putting anyone at risk." "And if diplomacy fails?" Elena asked quietly. Marcus glanced at Kira, whose luminescence now flickered with anxiety. "Then we move to Plan B, prep the rover for emergency departure." On the security feed, Vorex raised his staff, sending a pulse of energy against the outpost's shield. The barrier flickered but held. "Intruders from beyond stars." Vorex's voice came through the translation system, the algorithm struggling with his dialect. "Return sacred vessel. Gods demand completion." Elena activated the external comm. "We welcome peaceful exchange of knowledge and culture. But we cannot participate in harm to any sentient being." Vorex's response was another energy blast, stronger this time. Warning lights flashed as the shield integrity dropped to 87%. "Not much for negotiation, is he?" Marcus muttered. "Time for Plan B, Elena, hold them off as long as possible." Marcus guided Kira toward the rear of the facility where the rover waited, a rugged all-terrain vehicle designed for Azura's challenging landscape. As they prepared to depart, Kira suddenly pulled away, rushing to the botanical lab. "Kira, we don't have time," Marcus began, but stopped when she grabbed a collection of glowing seed pods from one of the specimen cases. She clutched them to her chest, her expression resolute. "Need these," she insisted. "Trust." Another energy blast rocked the facility. Shield integrity dropped to 65%. They loaded essential supplies into the rover: water purifiers, nutrition packs, medical kits, and communication equipment. Elena joined them as they prepared to depart. "The shield won't last another hour at this rate," she reported. "I've sent an emergency signal to the orbital station, but reinforcements won't arrive for at least 2 days. We'll lead them away from the outpost," Marcus decided. "Find somewhere to hole up until help arrives." Elena looked skeptical. "And go where, exactly? We've only mapped about 20% of this region." Kira, who had been listening intently, placed her hand on the navigation console. Her fingertips glowed as she traced a path across the topographical display, stopping at a series of cave formations 30 kilometers to the south. "Safe place," she said. "Old temples. Vorex fear." Marcus studied the route. Caves would provide natural shielding against their scanning technology, assuming they have any. "It's our best option." The rear airlock provided their escape route, opening onto a seldom-used maintenance path that led to the dense forest beyond. Marcus piloted the rover while Elena monitored communications from the outpost. Kira sat silently, her luminescence dimmed to near invisibility, a defense mechanism, Marcus realized, to avoid detection. They had covered almost 10 kilometers when Kira suddenly stiffened, grabbing Marcus's arm. "Stop," she whispered urgently. Marcus brought the rover to a halt just as a patrol of 3 Luminari hunters crossed their path ahead, carrying what appeared to be tracking instruments. Their skin patterns glowed with aggressive orange pulses. "They track my light signature," Kira explained, her vocabulary improving by the hour. "Body leaves, energy trail." Elena checked her scanner. "She's right. There's a distinct energy signature that matches her biological pattern. They're following it like bloodhounds. Kira reached for the seed pods she'd collected, cracking one open to reveal luminous spores that matched her own bioluminescence. Confusion, she explained, releasing the spores into the air behind them. They scattered on the breeze, each emitting a faint signature similar to Kira's own. Brilliant, Marcus murmured, watching as the hunting party diverted toward one of the false trails. That should buy us some time. They continued southward, navigating increasingly difficult terrain as the forest gave way to rocky highlands. Twice more they encountered patrols, and each time Kira's seed pod strategy allowed them to evade detection. By nightfall, they reached the foothills where Kira had indicated the caves would be. The terrain proved too rough for the rover, forcing them to continue on foot. Marcus secured the vehicle in a sheltered ravine, disguising it with native foliage. 2 hours of hiking, at most, he estimated, studying the route ahead. Can you make it? Kira nodded, though exhaustion was evident in her diminished glow. The ordeal had taken its toll, but determination burned in her eyes. The ascent tested their endurance. Sharp rocks cut through their footwear, and the thin air at higher elevation made breathing laborious. Elena stumbled once, twisting her ankle on loose scree, but refused to slow their progress. When they finally reached the cave entrance, Kira paused, placing her hand against ancient carvings that framed the opening. The symbols began to glow in response to her touch, illuminating a passage that led deeper into the mountain. These markings, Elena breathed, awestruck. They're responding to her bioluminescence. Some kind of biomolecular recognition system? Kira nodded. Old ones make. Welcome true luminari. She glanced back toward the valley where distant lights revealed Vorex's forces advancing. False believers cannot enter. The interior of the cave opened into a vast chamber where crystalline formations reflected and amplified Kira's natural glow, bathing the space in soft blue light. The walls were covered with intricate murals depicting beings that resembled both luminari and, remarkably, humans. This can't be, Elena whispered, examining the ancient artwork. These depictions suggest contact between our species thousands of years ago. Marcus studied the murals while Kira moved deeper into the chamber, approaching what appeared to be an altar. Unlike the crude stone where she had nearly been sacrificed, this structure was elegant, inlaid with crystals that resonated with her bioluminescence. Temple of Truth, Kira said, her voice stronger now, as if drawing energy from the sacred space. Vorex hides truth. Truth that sky visitors not gods. She pointed to the mural showing luminari and human-like figures standing together. Ancestors, family. Outside, a distant rumble suggested Vorex's frustration at losing their trail. For now, at least, they were safe within the ancient sanctuary, protected by technologies and truths long forgotten by those who now hunted them. As the three unlikely allies settled into their temporary refuge, Marcus couldn't help but wonder what other revelations awaited them in this temple of forgotten history. And more urgently, how they would use these revelations to stop Vorex before his fanaticism destroyed not only Kira, but any hope of peaceful contact between their worlds. Dawn filtered through crystalline formations in the cave ceiling, casting prismatic patterns across the temple floor. Marcus awoke to find Kira already active, her fingertips tracing ancient inscriptions with reverent focus. Her luminescence had strengthened overnight, pulsing with renewed vitality as though the temple itself had restored her. "You seem better," he observed, joining her at the wall of hieroglyphs. Kira nodded. "Temple gives strength. Sacred energy." She gestured to patterns similar to those beneath her skin. "Connected." Elena approached with her scanner, which displayed unusual energy readings throughout the chamber. The entire structure appears to function as some kind of biological amplifier. It's responding specifically to her bioluminescent frequencies. Marcus studied the murals more carefully in the morning light. They told a story, one that contradicted everything Vorex had claimed about the gods. Images showed spacecraft landing on Azura, and beings emerging that possessed characteristics of both humans and Luminari. These visitors, he mused, they weren't gods at all. Early explorers, Elena suggested. Perhaps even genetic engineers. Kira placed her hand on a central panel, causing it to illuminate. A holographic projection materialized in the center of the chamber, crude by modern standards but remarkably preserved. It depicted stellar maps and 2 planets, Earth and Azura. Remarkable, Elena breathed. This technology must be thousands of years old, yet it's still functional. The projection shifted to show humanoid figures manipulating genetic material, then 2 distinct evolutionary paths diverging from a common ancestor. One led to beings resembling humans, the other to the Luminari. We are related, Kira said with wonder. Same beginning. Different paths. Marcus felt a profound shift in his understanding. Not just first contact. Reunion. A distant explosion interrupted their discovery, vibrating through the temple walls. Dust and small fragments of crystal rained down from the ceiling. Vorex found us, Kira said, her luminescence flashing with alarm. Elena checked her comm unit. Still no response from the orbital station. Reinforcements must be delayed. Another explosion, closer this time. Marcus peered through a fissure in the rock wall to see Vorex leading a group of followers up the hillside. They carried primitive explosive devices, likely harvested from the same biologically reactive crystals that powered the temple. They're trying to blast their way in, he reported grimly. The entrance is still sealed, but it won't hold forever. Kira moved deeper into the temple, beckoning them to follow. More chambers. More truth. They navigated a series of narrowing passages, emerging into a smaller room dominated by what appeared to be a control console. Unlike the main chamber's primitive technology, this system looked surprisingly advanced. This can't be part of the original structure, Elena said, examining the console. It's newer, perhaps only centuries old rather than millennia. Kira placed her hands on the console's surface. It hummed to life, responding to her touch. Guardians left this. For when truth needed. The console projected another hologram, a message recorded by Luminari who appeared different from Kira, with more pronounced bioluminescent patterns and elongated features. The message played in an ancient dialect, but the translation matrix in Elena's comm unit captured enough to understand the essence. They were scientists, Elena translated, a faction of Luminari who preserved the truth about their origins. They maintained this temple as a repository of knowledge, knowing that someday religious extremists might twist their history. The recording continued, revealing the most shocking truth: the Luminari had not evolved naturally on Azura. They had been created, genetically engineered from the same ancestral stock as humans, but adapted to Azura's unique environment with bioluminescent capabilities that allowed them to communicate with the planet's ecosystem. We were designed to be caretakers, Kira whispered, understanding washing over her. Not worshippers. A third explosion rocked the temple, closer and more powerful than before. Crystalline structures shattered, sending sharp fragments flying across the chamber. They're breaking through, Marcus warned. We need a plan. The hologram shifted to display a final message, schematics for a device housed within the temple. According to the translation, it was a planetary communication array, designed to broadcast truth to all Luminari simultaneously through their connected bioluminescent network. This is why Vorex fears the temple, Kira realized. Truth would end his power. Elena studied the schematics. We could activate it, but it would require an incredibly powerful energy source to broadcast across the entire planet. Kira's expression became resolute. I can power it. My life energy. No, Marcus objected immediately. That could kill you. Not kill, Kira corrected. Transform. Return energy to network. She placed her hand over his, her luminescence pulsing in gentle waves. My purpose. Always was. Another explosion sent cracks spreading across the chamber walls. Vorex's voice echoed through the passages, growing closer. The heretic must complete her sacrifice. The gods demand it. Marcus looked into Kira's eyes, seeing not fear but determination. There must be another way. Elena's scanner beeped urgently. Multiple life signs approaching. They've breached the outer chamber. With grim resolve, Marcus helped Elena decode the activation sequence for the communication array. A cylindrical chamber rose from the temple floor, a biomolecular interface designed to connect with a luminary's natural bioluminescence. As they worked, Kira retrieved a small crystal from the altar. For you, she said, pressing it into Marcus's hand. Memory crystal. Truth keeper. The sound of Vorex's followers grew louder. They had only minutes before being discovered. The cylindrical chamber opened, revealing an interior lined with receptors designed to amplify a luminary's bioluminescent signals. Kira stepped toward it, but Marcus caught her arm. Wait, he said urgently. The hologram showed multiple luminari operating this device together. Sharing the energy burden. Kira nodded sadly. Long ago, many guardians. Now, only me. Elena's scanner suddenly registered new energy signatures outside the temple. Marcus, I'm picking up signals from orbit. The reinforcements have arrived. But they were too late. Vorex appeared at the chamber entrance, his followers behind him. His staff crackled with harvested bioluminescent energy, stolen life force from sacrificial victims. The blasphemer attempts to awaken the forbidden machine, he roared. Stop her. Marcus positioned himself between Vorex and Kira. Your lies end here. We know the truth about the luminary origins. Vorex laughed, a harsh sound devoid of warmth. Truth is what I declare it to be. God speak through me. No gods, Kira said clearly, her voice carrying strength despite its softness. Only ancestors. Creators who made us caretakers. She stepped closer to the cylindrical chamber. I show all luminari. Vorex raised his staff, channeling its stolen energy toward Kira. Then join your heretic ancestors. The energy bolt never reached her. Marcus intercepted it, the blast sending him crashing against the temple wall. Pain seared through his body, but he remained conscious enough to see what happened next. Kira's luminescence flared brighter than ever before, her anger at Marcus's injury fueling her power. She stepped into the cylindrical chamber, which sealed around her. Her light began to pulse in complex patterns, not just communicating but broadcasting to every luminary connected to the planet's bioluminescent network. Elena crouched beside Marcus, administering emergency medical treatment as the temple hummed with escalating energy. She's doing it, transmitting the historical record directly into their collective consciousness. Outside the temple, across villages and forests throughout the region, luminari paused as new information flowed through their bioluminescent connections. Ancestral memories, long suppressed, awakened within them, the truth of their origins, their purpose, their relationship to the planet and to humans. Vorex's followers lowered their weapons, their luminescence shifting to patterns of confusion, then understanding. One by one, they backed away from their leader, whose commands fell on increasingly unreceptive ears. In the cylindrical chamber, Kira's physical form began to change. Her solid body gradually dissolved into pure bioluminescent energy, feeding the broadcast system with her life essence. But rather than fear, her face displayed serene purpose, the fulfillment of her role as High Priestess, not as sacrifice but as revelator. As the transmission reached its peak, Marcus struggled to his feet, leaning heavily on Elena. Kira, he called out, though he knew she could no longer respond in any conventional way. The temple filled with blinding light as Kira's transformation completed. For one breathtaking moment, her energy signature formed a perfect image of her face in the air above them, smiling, at peace, before dispersing throughout the temple's crystal network. Vorex fell to his knees, his authority shattered as his followers abandoned him. In the distance, the sound of approaching rescue teams echoed through the passages. Marcus clutched the memory crystal Kira had given him, feeling a faint pulse of energy within it, a piece of her, preserved. Whether technology or miracle, he couldn't tell, but it offered a thin thread of hope that Kira's sacrifice might not be permanent after all. As human reinforcements secured the temple, Marcus gazed at the ancient murals with new understanding. This wasn't just an archaeological discovery or a first contact scenario. It was the beginning of a reunion between two branches of the same evolutionary tree, separated by millennia and light years, but connected by a shared origin and, perhaps, a shared future. Part 5, New Dawn. 3 days after Kira's transformation, Marcus sat on a ridge overlooking the valley where both human researchers and Luminari delegates had gathered. His injuries from Vorex's attack were healing slowly, aided by advanced medical treatments, but the emotional wound of Kira's sacrifice remained raw. The memory crystal she had given him hung from a cord around his neck, occasionally pulsing with faint blue light as if responding to his thoughts. Elena approached, datapad in hand, and settled beside him on the rocky outcrop. The diplomatic team is impressed with how quickly things are progressing. The Luminari Council has officially denounced Vorex's faction and embraced the historical truths Kira revealed. And Vorex? Marcus asked, his voice rough from disuse. Stripped of authority and confined to a rehabilitation center. Many of his followers have renounced their extremist beliefs. Elena paused, studying his profile. You haven't been to the negotiations yet. They're asking for you. Marcus closed his hand around the memory crystal. What's the point? The person who made this possible isn't here to see it. Are you so sure about that? Elena's expression softened as she gestured toward the temple. The science team has been analyzing the crystalline network. Kira's energy signature didn't dissipate, it integrated. She's part of the temple system now, perhaps even the planet's larger bioluminescent network. Hope flickered in Marcus's chest, but he tamped it down. Even if that's true, she's not herself anymore. Not the person we knew. A gentle voice interrupted their conversation. Person still here. Different form. Marcus turned sharply to find a young Luminari female standing nearby. Her features were not Kira's, but the luminescent patterns beneath her skin pulsed in a familiar rhythm. More significantly, the crystal at Marcus's neck glowed brightly in her presence. Kira, he whispered, scarcely daring to believe. The Luminari approached, her movements graceful yet hesitant. Not only Kira. Also Tella. She touched her chest. I am vessel. Kira consciousness joined with mine when truth broadcast. Many Luminari received fragments. I received most. Elena's scanner confirmed what seemed impossible. The bioluminescent patterns matched Kira's unique signature, overlaid on Tella's distinct biological blueprint. A form of conscious energy transfer, Elena murmured. Unprecedented. Tella/Kira knelt beside Marcus. Temple technology designed for this. High Priestess duty, pass knowledge when physical body ends. Vorex perverted tradition, made it death ritual instead of transcendence. Marcus reached out tentatively, his fingers hovering near her face. You remember everything? Remember all. Kira memories, Tella memories. Both now. Her luminescence rippled in amusement. Confusing sometimes. The significance dawned on Marcus gradually. This is why the temple was built, not just to preserve history, but to preserve consciousness across generations. Tella/Kira nodded. Many temples once existed. Network of knowledge. Vorex destroyed most, feared truth. She gestured toward the valley below. Now rebuild. Both peoples together. In the weeks that followed, a remarkable transformation swept across Azura. The revelation of shared ancestry between humans and Luminari catalyzed cooperation unprecedented in either species' recorded history. The human research outpost expanded into a joint scientific and cultural center, where knowledge flowed freely between the once separated branches of the same evolutionary tree. Marcus found himself at the center of these developments, working closely with Tella/Kira to bridge the remaining gaps in understanding. Though initially uncomfortable with her dual nature, he gradually came to appreciate the unique perspective she offered. Kira's knowledge of ancient traditions blended with Tella's progressive outlook. 6 months after the temple incident, they stood together on the ceremonial grounds where Kira had once been buried alive. The area had been transformed into a memorial garden, with bioluminescent plants arranged in patterns that told the true history of the Luminari. Federation has approved permanent diplomatic status for Azura, Marcus told her, reviewing the latest communique from Earth. They're sending a formal delegation next month. Tella/Kira's luminescence brightened with pleasure. Good beginning. Long journey still. She had grown more articulate as human language centers in Tella's brain integrated with Kira's memories, though her speech retained a distinctive melodic quality. The genetic research is fascinating, Marcus continued. Elena's team has identified the exact markers that were modified to create the Luminari adaptation to Azura. They believe the original engineers were trying to create a species that could communicate directly with the planet's ecosystem. Succeeded, Tella/Kira agreed, placing her hand against a nearby plant, which responded by intensifying its glow. We hear Azura's voice. Soon teach humans to hear too. The prospect both thrilled and humbled Marcus. Humans had spent centuries developing technology to understand alien worlds, while the Luminari had been designed from the beginning to connect with their environment at a biological level. As dusk fell, they joined a gathering at the temple, now restored and expanded as a center for learning. Young Luminari studied alongside human researchers, exchanging knowledge about their shared past and distinct evolutionary paths. Vorex, now stripped of his previous authority, worked quietly in the agricultural section, his punishment being to nurture life rather than sacrifice it. The cylindrical chamber that had facilitated Kira's transformation had been repurposed as a communication hub, allowing conscious energy sharing between willing Luminari. The practice, once reserved for dying high priestesses, was now understood as a sacred form of knowledge preservation, not ending life, but extending it through community memory. Tomorrow we activate orbital relay, Tella/Kira reminded him. Connect Azura to Earth Information Network. Marcus nodded, both excited and apprehensive about the technological integration. Your people are sure they're ready for that much outside influence? Her expression became thoughtful, Kira's wisdom evident in her eyes. Isolation brought fear. Fear brought Vorex. Connection brings understanding. As twilight deepened, the temple crystals activated automatically, channeling the stored bioluminescent energy into a spectacle of light that echoed the stars above. Luminari children watched in wonder, learning the true stories of their creation, not as servants to imaginary gods, but as caretakers of a living world and distant cousins to the humans who had returned to them. Marcus felt the memory crystal pulse warmly against his skin, synchronized with Tella/Kira's luminescence. Though he sometimes still grieved for Kira's original form, he had come to understand that she hadn't truly been sacrificed. She had been transformed, elevated, her consciousness preserved in both the crystal network and in Tella's living mind. What does it feel like? He asked suddenly. Having two sets of memories, two identities. Tella/Kira considered the question carefully. Like river joining ocean. Both waters still exist, but cannot separate again. New thing created. A shooting star streaked across the sky, a reminder of the meteor shower that had once been interpreted as divine displeasure but was now understood as a natural phenomenon by both species. The universe is vast, Marcus mused. I wonder how many other offshoots of humanity might be out there, adapted to different worlds, thinking themselves alone. Not alone anymore, Tella/Kira said with certainty, her hand finding his. The contact sent a pleasant resonance through the crystal, as though completing a circuit between past and present, between sacrifice and salvation. Never again alone. As the twin moons of Azura rose above the horizon, their light merged with the bioluminescence of the temple and its inhabitants, creating a beacon visible from orbit, a symbol of reunion between long-separated branches of the same cosmic family tree. The sacrifice that had begun in darkness and fear had transformed, against all odds, into a new dawn of understanding. In that moment, watching humans and Luminari gathering beneath the same stars that had guided their ancestors, Marcus understood that Kira had never truly been a sacrifice to imaginary gods. She had been a bridge between worlds, her apparent ending merely the beginning of a greater connection that would shape both species for generations to come. And in that knowledge, he finally found peace.